Hi everybody, this is David and welcome to our week 7 Fireside Chat, February 26, 2018 through Sunday, March 4th, 2018. This is our final Fireside Chat for Educational Leadership 655, Pupil Services and Non-Discrimination, Viterbo University. So this is it, folks, because then we get into our research module and there is not a Fireside Chat for the research module. So let's talk about today in our final Fireside Chat. Hey, I've got it on one page. So if that's at all, it's throwing off all of our light here. All right, here we go. So it is our final Fireside Chat. Thank you for being active posters. Once we get through this week, I'll open up the research module, and there are no discussion questions or participation points that can be earned for posting during that week. So once you're done here, then you're completely done with discussion questions, participation points, and once we get into the research module, then it is only working on that final project. So I will post a few things as resources within that module, but really there's not going to be much there. So the research module, make it useful to you. Okay, so I'm not worried about like APA formatting and all of that. One thing though, like don't attach your board policies and things like that to your document and things like that. I don't need to know. I discovered our board policy was last updated 14 years ago, and here's a copy of it. I don't need a copy of it. So if you just say something like, in reviewing some policies, related to pupil services, if that's what you want to do in your non-discrimination report or things like that. So, so it doesn't need to be a lot of link outs to other things. If there's something definitely that you want me to see and submit, you can do that. But again, this is more or less your perception of your student services programming in your either district, or you could say in my building, however you want to do that. You can, again, make it useful for you. So if you're in a large district, maybe you just want to make it like in my building. This is what I see for student services, and covering harassment, non-discrimination, reporting, investigation, disability awareness, things like that we've covered throughout this entire class. And have those Alexandria, Virginia documents I've made available once again. And just a reminder to probably take a look at those when you do your final paper, because the Alexandria, Virginia documents do a nice job of balancing qualitative, which would be like interviewing people, with quantitative, which would just be statistics. So a lot of reports that we do, right, are going to be statistics or quantitative. And I don't want this to be a huge quantitative report out, that we have this percentage of this and this percentage of students doing this and whatever. It needs to be a balance of quantitative and qualitative. Or, I talked to the principal about this, or I talked to some other special ed teachers, or, had surveyed some of them, whatever you want to do, talk to some students, but include some of that narrative in there. I think it's very important that narrative brings context to everything. So let's see, please have your final assignment submitted by April 14th. I will grade and return those within about a week. So you'll get those back. Contact me if you have any questions. But again, if you can get those in by the 14th of April, it's hard to believe April 14th isn't that far off. We'll be in great shape. So in this week, so week 7, I posted the video from Savannah, who attended or attends Toma High School. Video is a year too old. And she talks about what it's like to be Savannah and the rare condition which she presents with. And so in doing that, like I like that video. I like that video, but it's something I wouldn't see for every student. It's something I wouldn't write in an IEP. Like every student will do this as part of their demonstrating understanding of their strengths, weaknesses, and ability to, articulate those, and also how maybe their understanding their disability area. I don't even kind of like to use that term, but let's say, understanding their strengths and their weaknesses and what their learning style is or whatever. But I think with Savannah, what made it stand out to me is that the school has this already this medium where they do the school TV show type thing, the school news and stuff. So it made sense to kind of bring bring Savannah into that. It wasn't like this unique structure that had to be created. And then, it helped me a lot. I didn't understand Savannah's, something's popping up there. What is it? I don't know. Anyway, this computer's been acting a little weird lately. But so yeah, I thought it was helpful. So it's one of those things, though, again, I would make optional for students if they wanted to do something like that. I don't think I would require it. I would make it as an option. There are some people who would argue and say, well, by doing that, you're giving a false image of what it's like really to be like Savannah and to live through her day. Some people might argue that. And that's also the concept of, if there's a Disability Awareness Day and you have various things that you do, like, you put on thick gloves and you need to put a screw in a bolt and thread a screw in a bolt, or that you might need to, sit in a wheelchair and go through like an obstacle, course or something like that. And there are certain things that, or do something blindfold or whatever, or with earmuffs on. And some people will be very much for those activities and say it helps to raise awareness and foster discussion. Other people will be like, no, like that doesn't help, and it gives a false sense of what something is really like. So you just have to understand your environment with that. I personally think some activities like that are very worthwhile for being discussion starters. But I remember in particular a district that had students sit in a wheelchair and then had to do like an obstacle course and then come back out. And one of the complaints was, well, if you're in a wheelchair though, you're feeling soreness from being in the wheelchair like the entire day, and then you have to transfer. If you're in the bathroom in a wheelchair, or if you're leaving and you're trying to get out of the building, and the little ice that has accumulated outside and trying to navigate that. So you're not giving an impression of what this is really like for someone that does need and depends upon a wheelchair. So, but those are the things that you have to weigh in doing disability awareness and disability education activities. But again, I'm typically for that. I really like that Savannah video. The David Hyde interview. So please take the time. It is an hour long, but David and I worked together previously and also work together now. And I talk about when I first was working with him at CISA, that there was his first day, there were pink flamingos that were put up on both sides of the walkway going up to CISA. And it was a fairly kind of steep walkway. And anyway, the reason that was done, and I shared this during this interview with him, I found out later, someone thought it was kind of just a goofy thing that somebody had done. But it was actually one of the staff members did that because she knew Dave was starting and he was blind, and this would be a way for him to find the sides of the steps, because it was kind of a steep fall. Well, I mean, enough 6-8 inches, but then it was kind of on an incline. So that was this way for her to get in early and to do these things as a staff member. So that sharing that out with Dave and how some people just didn't know, like, if they saw them going into an incorrect room or something, should they tell them or should they not tell him, or even like just understanding how to approach him and make things accessible and get his input and things. So it ultimately came down to the point where, we talk a lot about how fear becomes this barrier, lack of knowing, so people pull back, and it was just this potluck, and then people, asked Dave some questions, Dave asked people some questions, and things were fine after that. So it's a fun video, and it's also a video that is going to be pretty heartfelt at times, because Dave will talk about some of the challenges in his life, as well as the different success stories. So, but yeah, I do encourage you to take that in, because I think what that gets into, okay, I consider that awareness and removing fear due to lack of information, and ultimately you're removing this kind of unintended discrimination. And I've used that word unintended discrimination a couple times in response posts, like if you are putting together your handbook, and I don't know who it was who looked at their handbook again and had taken sections of it and put it in readability scales, like and it was coming out like college level. So that when you do something like that, create a handbook with jargon and terminology that's difficult for not only kids but parents to understand, especially English language learners or blue collar parents, for example. That's a stereotype. I'm just saying that it is much better to have very descriptive terminology that people are going to have higher readability of. So you can take things like that and say, hey, this kind of comes out at this level, so how can we make it more descriptive? And then make it more descriptive, throw it in, get another level reading on it. You can work with your title teachers on it too. But I mean, those online reading level those are pretty reliable. But yeah, and you can work your way down to a level. And it doesn't seem like when you read it, all of a sudden it is like super simplified. It actually seems much more descriptive and vibrant when it does come down, because you're using descriptive terms. So I think that it becomes again this unintended discrimination that we just have to be aware of in the documents that we're using with people too. And that's something I wasn't aware of until probably later in my career. Somebody had pointed that out to me, and I wanted to bring that forward to you because it's something that's a small change to recognize. And like in your 5-year pupil non-discrim report for the DPI, that's something too. You can say, we went through handbooks and went through some of our language, went for readability, and here's what we were finding. So we got together as a group and we worked with some descriptive terminology, whatever, to come down to a different readability level, which is more accessible to students and to parents. That is something that you would definitely include in your DPI 5-year report if that's something you did regarding like your harassment and non-discrimination handbook, procedures and policies and things like that. So, all right, let me spend some time on telling you how I conducted tabletop exercises. So I do actually have a folder somewhere, and if I can find it before the end of the class, I'll share it. And I included 1 or 2 tabletops and kind of a layout of how I would do those, and some sheets and things like that of how to document those. I did tabletops at UW-Madison and have done them for districts. I've taught people how to do tabletops. So tabletop exercise. I apologize I don't have this. I had major reconfiguration of the studio down here, and with the computer, a lot of stuff got moved into external hard drives and external folders and things like that in the drives, and I'm not sure where everything kind of is. I know it's like there, but I just don't know like what is in every file if I'm not using it like right at the moment, and that's something I hadn't specifically used before in this class. But okay, so imagine a large room, okay? So, that you have maybe, like a 20-foot by 20-foot room. So think about whatever you can have in your school, it would be that size, And what you do, and you can set this up, you know, like in a gymnasium too or something like that, but you set up a group of or table, so it's like in a square, or you could set it up in a circle, whatever. But I mean, think of like 4 tables, so they're set up in square shape. And then that is going to be your core of like your principals, your counselors, your psychologists, maybe nurse, superintendent. And then you're going to have one person there, and the only thing that person will do is every time a decision is made, they are going to write down the time and then the decision that's made, and then there's like a screen. So they're typing, and this is going up on a screen, like through a projector or whatever, so people can look and see what decisions have been made. So whenever there's a formal decision that's been made by the group, it gets written down on a piece of paper and handed to this person. And then eventually, when the exercise is done, you can print this off, and you can run the exercise for so many minutes, like we're going to run it for 30 minutes or something. Now when I say 30 minutes, there's times you pause during that and you have injects and discussion, or you could run it for less than that, 15 minutes, whatever. But you're writing down like all the decisions that are being made, you're sequencing those out. And the reason you do that is to go back and be able to study your heuristics, or to look at how many options you kind of considered when you went through things. Or if things bog down at one point and kind of just the flow of it, it's going to show itself on paper really well. So one of the things I would do is I would kind of supervise it. So I would run, and then I would have periodic injects based upon people's decisions that they made. I might say something like, okay, you know, like it's a bomb threat or something like that, or so you have to evacuate a school, but the you know, the bus company, the area that the police want to block off is 5 blocks. So now, like, how are you going to get people from where the school is, you know, 5 blocks away? And then, you know, one of the other things is, you know, your two-way radios aren't working in that distance. So in the moment, like how you know, that's just something. So you got to problem solve it. Like, are you going to use phones? And then down the road after this, it's like, you know, we have to check our two-way radio systems, because if you have a digital two-way radio, it should go for a few miles. You should be fine in something like that. If you have an analog two-way radio, it's not going to work. So that's something too. Schools and their communication systems, you know, that they want to check out, or that you have. You can have apps where you have people's cell phone, you know, and it kind of works. I think Zello is one of those, ZELLO. They used it a lot during the rescue operations for Hurricane Irma and Hurricane Harvey. So anyway, so you have this core group, which is largely your school staff, like your school counselors. So let's say, yeah, you know, you want to do this as a district, and let's say it is the drill that you're doing is that there's been a explosion at a building a few blocks away from the middle school, and there's a, you know, gas cloud that's been released, and they're telling everybody to stay inside their residencies, or inside, you know, like the school and things, while this dissipates, while they get a handle on this. And things like this, actually, you know, they happen quite a bit. Not quite a, well, in Wisconsin, I think it was Waiwega, it was Columbus, they had something like that happen and affected the school. I think Beaver Dam also. But so that's like that's that case scenario. You can have any case scenario, you know, that you want. You can bring out. And again, there are books that have like school safety tabletop exercise ideas and things like that. They're not that hard to find. But the way I would structure that, so I have this inside group. Then on the outside is where I have some of the county police, some of the local police sitting, some of the fire department sitting, and then just some observers, like a couple parents, other, you know, like the you know, well, let's see, maybe like the head of public works is there, something like. So you have these outside people, and then they are watching what you're doing, and then periodically you're going to stop and say, okay, like, so how would, if the police were to contact us, how would that happen? So then they're giving some input into that, and then like parents might say, okay, like this is happening, but I'm not sure, how am I being notified of this? So we might pause and just stop the clock at that moment and gather up some questions that we want to address later. And that was great to have parents kind of watch this process. So we would start out, and I would have a PowerPoint, and the PowerPoint would kind of lead us through, and it would say, okay, you've just been notified, or you've heard this rumble, and you've just been notified by the police that there was an explosion in the industrial park, which is a couple blocks away from where the middle school is, and there's some kind of gas that appears to be released, and they're telling you to shut the building down, don't let anyone in, don't let anyone out, and there's going to be more information forthcoming. That's all you know. So then where do you take it? So again, you have the outside group watching this, and then in that scenario, right away it was a chain of command. The superintendent was there, and then it was also like, well, if the superintendent's not here, who's next in command and who would make some of these decisions? But the superintendent said, would immediately with buildings and grounds, the buildings and grounds person was there. We'd shut down all ventilation, and then we would shut the buildings, tell the principals to shut the buildings, nobody in, nobody out. And then there was a pause, and then it was we would tell people to put wet towels underneath the door, the exterior doors and stuff to make sure, or if we had tape, to tape the seams on the door to prevent any exchange of air, make sure all the windows were closed and things like that. So that happened, and then there was a question from a parent, well, what if I came up and I'm pounding on the door and I want to get my kid, but the door now is locked, and is there going to be a sign from the school saying go back to your vehicle and listen to the radio or whatever? There's an emergency. We've been instructed to keep the building closed at this time, and staff and students safe. And then also, like, the school nurses had a question. They said, well, what should we be watching for symptoms? Like, what if we have some kids who were out in the playground when this happened and we got them in and maybe they had some exposure? Or, again, what are we looking for? What are we watching for here? So, and then it's the fire department, would pause, and they would say, well, we're going to respond to the scene, and that's going to be consuming all of our resources. Like, we're not coming to the school, so you're kind of on your own right now. Like, we'll be calling in other agencies from around the area to help. But yeah, I mean, if it becomes an area, or as far as like the school, if we have to do mass evacuations, we'll have to inform you. But you have to understand, right now we have this. We might also have a medical facility, a nursing home, and all of these things. So you are going to have to be on your own for a while. So yep, we have to figure that out, and also figure, well, what if we have some kids who are out in the community doing something like at the bowling alley for a bowling outing, and that they have to be notified, so they don't come back, because we're not. And if they come back, do you let them in the building because now they're going through and they've been contaminated? So those questions would come up, like, what if someone is pounding on the outside of the building? Like, do we let them in, or do we not let them in? And part of that was, well, I mean, if it was just somebody, if it was a student who was outside, or if they come in, like, do we have some decontamination process, or do they go into some isolation area? So, I mean, these types of things, this is how that outer group and the inner group kind of work together. And then the counselors were working on how they would make sure that students, any students that were upset, that they were working to address their needs, and make them feel safe, because, this would obviously be very traumatizing for students, and students to be separated from their parents, and then what they would be, telling kids about social media, like, if they're texting out to other people, or if they're getting information back or something like that. And buildings and grounds of, what also, if you have parents who are arriving, at the scene, so how is that going to be handled? If you're not letting them into the buildings, so through police and through buildings and grounds, of course, you can't put your buildings and grounds at risk too. but is there somebody then, who's taking, who's taking the lead on getting that communication out and getting those phone calls out? And also, yeah, buildings and grounds need to be very aware of that facility and making sure like ventilation was shut down and be able to problem solve things in the moment. So, it's those types of things that all come to life. And you can do these for any number of scenarios. Literally, it's endless. But what you do then is everything that comes up like that, and so you're documenting kind of minute by minute, the decision. The first one is shut down the ventilation, and then, the principal said, I'm having all of the doors locked, and I'm going to have signs printed, that do not come into the building. The building is closed down right now because of this emergency situation. And then also, a call that would go out to parents through the automated system. Okay, well, that's this person's going to be in charge of that, and so here's what we want that message to be. And should we do these messages even like ahead of time, or like make sure somebody proofreads it first, that they understand the message and it's not alarming, but more informative. And that's where the parents came into of saying we want to be informed, like we want to know what's going on because our kids are going to tell us that something is wrong at the school, and we're going to see, the fire engines and, blocks away and stuff like this. So, but again, that's hopefully gives you an idea of how I conducted that. And then again, you basically, I would allocate like a morning to do this. And the tabletop itself might only take us 15 or 20 minutes to go through it. And then we would take a break, and the usually secretary who was typing up like all the decisions that had been made and things like that, she would create handouts for everybody, and it would be like numbered 1, 2, 3, 4 in the time, or I think it would just be by time. And then people would have these, and actually in 15-20 minutes, I mean, she was typing probably 10 pages of stuff. I mean, it was just like nonstop. And then we would go back and just have a discussion. Okay, here's what we first got in. Here's what we did. Here's what we did. And like, what are people's thoughts about that? And you're analyzing process. It's not like this was right, this was wrong. You're analyzing process and saying, and someone would say, okay, I have a question like right here, like, what about this? Or we didn't talk about this, or here's something that could happen. Or, someone saying, I liked right away that we got the signs on the doors. So we definitely want to make sure we do, something, to that effect, and maybe got something up on the website like right away. Here we in our first few minutes. So like this was really a good thing. So let's make a note of that. And then going through and talking once you got to certain points of like, what are your options if somebody is outside? Are you going to just decide not to let them in because you don't want to risk contaminating the other kids? You let them in and put them in a certain area? Do you put them in the showers, and if there's a contaminant, to try to get it off them? I mean, how are you getting information on this? So it's those types of things which took up a lot of time on the conversation too. And then it was, what are we doing with students to make sure, that our students are staying calm, and if students are, again, with special needs, are having difficult time with, if we're staying in classrooms, if we're not having movement around the building, how are we handling that? So any changes in routine, how we might be able to address those. What if we get up to lunch? Are we bringing some kind of snacks from the lunchroom in to the classrooms? Are we having kids centrally come in? I mean, so these types of questions we would go through. And what it did though is it really helped people feel that if they were in a situation, they would think about what their options were, and then they would ask each other. And also, I think if you tell people ahead of time, I know, and research proves this, if you tell people ahead of time what to likely expect, especially like, like the parents, like expect that this area is probably going to be totally blocked off and you're not going to be able to get into this area at all. It's, by law enforcement, this is going to be blocked off. And if they know that ahead of time, they respond to that much better. So it's something of being very transparent and getting information like that out there. So I really liked that process of kind of that inner circle and outer circle, and then everybody had a chance to give feedback before we got done. And also like what did you find helpful about the drill? Where did you have questions? Did you feel we should have paused at other places and things like that? Now, to keep continuity in this, I typically I would want it to keep rolling. Once in a while, I would do the injects and throw things in there. But I would say that as far as like pausing it to have discussions, we really limited that. Whoop. This is, I don't know. Hopefully it's nobody saying, hey, we need you to stay in your place because of it's kind of odd. It's kind of later at night here. All right, well, whatever. So, live. Okay. So, tabletops. But please check out Tabletop Exercises. Much more time to go through things. You have a high learning rate in tabletops. And I've argued, and I've looked at the research, but if you do, try to do close to authentic simulations, it's not that people remember those any better. And it scares people, and I personally believe in tabletops. I think they're the way to go. I think you can step through some things as and definitely have your lockdown drills and stuff, but like trying to do like a surprise lockdown, like with somebody in a building who pretends to be an intruder, I don't think personally there's any place for that in schools. So definitely look into tabletops. So shout outs. I have 2 shout outs. First one is Priscilla. Priscilla, you talked about the BLM and the Pride Flags, and where you did a survey, or you were part of a group that did a survey with staff on whether or not to fly the flags. And you had 2 different results come up on the surveys. One was 70%, one was an 80%. And you had some narrative about that, but you wrote, I really think there was a large problem with deficit ideology, and without dismantling this idea, nothing will ever get better. Our students won't have equal access, and our communities will continue to see disenfranchising systems like schools. So I thought that was really insightful. I mean, that's an incredible statement. So, this deficit ideology and the disenfranchising systems like schools. So the question I had posed with the flying the flags was this something just at the building that was done more of a site-based decision, or was it something like that all of the schools were going to do? And I asked that because I remember Madison School's Art Rainwater, the former superintendent, friend of mine, was telling me that one of the schools decided to do something, which was more in the area of bringing social justice awareness to the student population and the parents, but it was only done at that school, and the other schools weren't aware that that school was doing it. And so it seemed like that school was a little bit of an outlier, and it was something that it was hard then. Of course, Dr. Rainwater supported his principal, but in meeting with the principal afterwards said, if you do something like this, first let me know. And the second part is, I mean, at that time it was we're talking, 15, 20 years ago. So, but, the other part was let the other schools know, because otherwise it seems like they've maybe have decided not to participate in it, because they're not doing it. They weren't aware, but maybe what's implied is they've chose to not be aware, to participate, and chose not to support this. So that was the only question I asked about how this had worked with with the flags, if this was something done at the school only, or if this was something done like through a group of principals. So Deanna, you wrote regarding the role of investigating harassment or discrimination. So you said, I will say this is some of the most difficult work I do. It is very sensitive in nature and tends to be very emotional for the people involved. I have learned it is best to learn to ask the right questions and listen carefully. It is not for me to judge or take sides. I gather objective finds and report them as necessary. That is easier when dealing with people you have no working relationship with. It is much more difficult when it involves colleagues that you work with directly. If either the director or I have a close relationship with the people involved, we ask the other to complete the investigation. So my response, I think that is excellent advice. It's a very thorough statement, and it concludes with excellent advice. First of all, yes, you're documenting, you're creating records when you're doing these investigations. Those will remove some of the emotion that you feel. I mean, because the documents will be very, objective. People can and do become very emotional when you're investigating something. Like, it's very hard for somebody to be investigated. If you say, we had an investigation that you had said this to a student, the mom or dad had called parents. So we need to talk to the other students. So we're doing, you're going to get a paid half day off from this point forward. We brought in a sub teacher, and for a teacher, I mean, that's pretty devastating news to get that, but it's for that teacher's best interest in that case, so they don't come back and naturally feel like they have to defend themselves to the students, or to say, hey, remember yesterday when whatever happened thing. That's kind of the human tendency to try to get into defense mode. So it's just to remove you from this, and we're going to have we have an investigative process, and then we'll call you like later in the day or something. And so the other part is, so if you know the people that you're investigating, it could be your positionality, natural bias, that can all come into play in addition to emotion. And you can maybe, it's subtly going to frame the way that you want things to play out. So here's an example. I was contacted earlier this school year by a principal who I had worked with previously. And this principal had said was in a district she had been in for a couple of years, and was saying, my billing in our district's special ed is kind of a mess, okay? And I would like you to consider coming in and do like a whole program assessment, and tell us what you find and recommendations and so forth. And really kind of pushed this pretty hard, because knew that I would do this very thorough job, and genuinely wanted this to get better, but also was so close to it, was having a hard time, because she had, these are the people that she worked with every day, and I think she was in the role of special education director and principal, and it wasn't a very big district. But anyway, I said, well, there's two things. I said, one is I don't do stuff like this in Wisconsin because of this reason. I mean, it's a conflict of interest. I know you, and there's a certain, I know you have high expectations, high standards, and there's a certain bias that I'm going to come in to this with, because I've worked with you in other settings, and I'm going to know how you were in those settings, and it's going to be difficult. And I don't, and I said, the other part is that what if, going through this, I find that you're contributing to this process, which is resulting, in the system not working well. I'm going to have a hard time conveying that to you. I mean, because we're also friends, and I don't want to not be able to do that, to not be able to do that professional member check of sitting down and saying, hey, like right here, like this is a part where through the process, you know, you are contributing, you know, what unintentionally, you know, probably, but because of this, or because of the way that you're forcing, you know, like this scheduling of IEP meetings, or right here, like you know, you're intervening in some decisions that really the IP team should be making, or whatever it is. And I said, I don't want to do that. I can't. I said it would compromise that professional, the professional relationship, and then also the friendship. And I said, so I'm passing. And you know, so that was okay. You know, it was definitely the right thing to do, because again, I would have had a hard time doing that evaluation and kind of isolating the principal's role in that and being very objective with the principal. And then one of the things, for example, that with one of my clients out west, and this is happening like right now. This is happening. So this is 8:10 p.m. February 26th. I'm recording this, and this is literally happening at 9:30 tonight. I'm having this phone call, and they had asked me to assemble, help them assemble a certain reporting format for their district for child abuse and some other areas. And what they had requested, I understand why they did it, but what happens is if they were to actually go through and to do what they want to do in this proposal, this district wants to do, it would end up undercutting their state's child abuse mandatory reporting law, and then also OCR reporting for harassment. So it's a difficult situation, because initially they said, and I know why they're doing it, and it's not, it doesn't have ill intentions behind it or anything like that. They're trying to streamline something which you really cannot streamline. It has to go the way I believe that it is currently designed. But it does take a lot of time in the way that it's currently designed, and I don't think there's a way to streamline that I really struggle with it without compromising the integrity of the system. So again, I understand what's happening, and I understand why they're asking for this to be done, and I had to be upfront and get back to them. And I said, listen, I don't know where to take this on, because I have concerns about this, and here are like 3 reasons I wouldn't do this, and like that I actually can't, you know, do this, because it really comes down to, you know, you're circumventing potentially your mandatory reporting if you go this route with your process, and you know, you don't want to do that. Like, absolutely don't want to do that. And the other part is, you don't want to accidentally set yourself up to do a, like, you know, child abuse investigation on your own, independent of CPS. That's why CPS exists, and that's why the state laws exist. And I said, you're going down paths which I can see how you're trying to streamline your system and make it more responsive and helpful, but you're also crossing laws that are put in place, and you're creating some serious liabilities if you go down this. And it's things like that I will not create for you. I can't. And I've struggled. I said I put in a lot of research on this. I've looked at different states, looked at different ways to do this, and I don't know a way to do this. And I said, if I don't know a way to do this, not that I'm the smartest person in the world with systems thinking and all of this, but I said, if I don't know how to come up with what you're asking, my guess is the people who are having to do the reporting and whatever are going to have a hard time with it too. So it was one of those member check moments. Like, I had to be completely honest, and this is somebody who pays me and pays me well to do different projects with this district. So And, I know that I can end up, they can say, well, we'll go with somebody else. And maybe that'll happen tonight. I don't know. But the other, I don't think it'll go that route because they really, initially when I said, I have concerns about this and here's why, there was some pushback. And then the response, which, results in our phone conversation tonight, was much more positive following that, which I would totally expect. Like I would totally expect anybody, including myself, a natural, I remember my dissertation defense of going through and just getting pummeled, by my dissertation team, during my defense, and then having to make adjustments on my dissertation and things like that. And, finally, it was approved and we were all good. And actually it was really good that happened because then I was able to fulfill areas and bring in different theories, Carl Wake sense making, things like that, which really helped not only that, but just helped me professionally. So it was all good, but in the moment, like I was totally not expecting it, and I was trying to get real defensive and defending instead of listening. And I think they responded a little bit in defensive. And again, now I think they've had time to think about it. And I said to them, I have to be completely honest with you. I am your member check in this. You pay me to be honest with you. And if I tried to help you create what you're creating here, this isn't in your best interest. That is my professional opinion. That is my member check with this, and I wouldn't be able to do this for you. And so that is where you have to be. And as you said with investigations, if it is too close to you, if you're in the role of investigator, have somebody else do that in the team. Somebody else from a different building to come in and to do that. Somebody from a different role, different capacity in administration. So I think that is really important because you do need to maintain working relationships. That definitely does need to happen. The other part, I'm just going to play off of that before I wrap up here, is if you do, and I think you should consider this, debriefings after pretty significant events. Like let's say you have a fourth grader at an elementary school has a complete meltdown and destroys a classroom, and it takes 6 hours and 10 people to get it back into shape. And the police were called, and the parents are there, and they're recording it, and they're screaming, and there's profanity and all of this stuff. And kids are moved out of that area of the school and things like that, and the whole schedule's disrupted and things like that. But I've been in situations like that where then when it's done, teachers, they'll burst out in tears. Just the emotions, even principals behind closed doors, and it's just because all that emotion is there. And you need to have a decompression with that in a talk through. And that's one thing I do as a critical incident debriefer with the county. And actually have a county meeting coming up here in a couple of weeks. But that is something where that needs to be done, and probably not done if the building principal was involved in that. It was having to run down and be part of the nonviolent team and helping if there was a hold, putting the child in a protective hold or something like that, and the adrenaline. It's best then to not also have that principal in the role at the end of the day of trying to debrief the staff, for 10 or 15 minutes. When I say debrief, not of like what happened, but just like how is everybody, and make sure you go home. Maybe you take a walk tonight. Maybe read a book. Something on TV. Just and we're okay. We're okay. And any thoughts and but it's one of those things, and there's very specific ways to debrief, and I'm not doing justice to it. But they're critical instant debriefing programs. But it makes sense to not have that principal who is also involved in that event, because they're also at an amped up level, so they're having a hard time processing that too. So to have somebody from district office or from another building come over and to give that 15 minutes with people, and you go through and just kind of you know, listen to them and just tell them, you know, do some things tonight of, you know, or ask, you know, what are you going to do tonight? And, you know, well, I'm going to get out, I'm going to get, you know, get in a walk, I'm going to watch a movie, or, you know, whatever it is. But there's, you definitely want to have some connection with people after an event like that. And again, too many times it never happens, which is bad. It's really bad. And the other part is, if it does happen, you're putting that like on your principal or maybe a counselor to lead who was right in the middle of that. So that person isn't getting the opportunity themselves to receive that critical instant debriefing. They're having to conduct it. So anyway, thank you so much for everything in this class. I mean, this is going to be our last fireside chat. I'm looking forward with Viterbo. I think in the future I'll probably be doing some blended classes, so we'll have some time in the classroom and not just fully online. That's the way it used to be. Like I used to teach everything in the classroom. Had milk crates, so I had a milk crate for every single day of class, and so, you know, I don't know. So the class would be like a Friday night and a Saturday. So there might be, I don't know, 8 or 10 times it met. So I had like the milk crates, and this would be day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and I'd bring in my milk crate. So, you know, I completely started teaching for Viterbo face-to-face, and then eventually ended up blended, and then ended up doing all online. So I'm looking forward to getting back into some blended, and I think, you know, that's going to be good too, because then it's going to be easier for me to get to know, you know, all of you a little bit better. But I really, for an online class, I am super impressed with all of you. Your level of commitment, sharing your resources, insight to the districts, the nuances you've picked up on, things that you then take from class and you build upon those in discussions, and you recall them, add them in. You're very divergent thinkers. That was evident in the food allergy learning team assignments. Each team had kind of its own very unique approach to helping Bruce, all very strongly justified and appropriate. So I do definitely appreciate that from all of you. And again, you've really distributed, but have put forward a lot of effort, a lot of professionalism. And I've never had a class before that has shared so many documents and also so many links to everybody else. It's been great. I appreciate that so much. So in my closing, I want to say it's a privilege to instruct this class and to get to know you, even though it's through virtual means, and look forward to you, if you're not already in a role of administration, of getting into administration and leading in pupil services and special education. It's very rewarding, and I do come at this also, you know, from the legal side of it, just to show you some of that. But again, I'm dealing with 49 other states, and I don't think that there's any, you know, increase in litigation. You know, like you should be terrified of litigation or anything like that. It's just that there are certain things I want to bring to light of the, you know, if you can address them early, like professional development, making sure that you have people trained and signed off on things, and that helps you. And then also understanding very much, you know, what your job description is, and making sure that you're having documents created, like if there's a bullying investigation, that there's a document, or there's a record, there's an entry made on that, and things like that. So that's where hopefully I've been able to help out on things like that. So thank you again, and don't forget about the DPI for resources. Phenomenal. They are incredible. CDC has a lot of resources. Department of Ed has a lot of resources, and use each other for resources. Like, you know, check, hey, do you have a policy on, you know, service animals or comfort animals, or, you know, something else came up here with a third-party provider, and here's how we're handling it, but I'm not quite sure. Like, what do you think about it? Or any ideas that you might have and things like that. Or to, like we have some excess equipment, and I want to make some neighboring districts aware of it in case, they can use it or something like that. I think too there's a lot of opportunity for collaboration with neighboring districts and professional development and sharing of equipment and things like that. It's an exciting time because the technology is incredible. I mean, think about it, like what you hold in a smartphone, which I have mine over there, but just, the native devices that kids have, on an iPad, and that affect, what the apps and the text, speech to text, and that you can have Google Docs and you can access things from anywhere, and just things that 15, 20 years ago we didn't have. And I remember, breaking down these barriers of what I would, barriers between the student and receiving an education. I mean, it's just incredible today. So I was contacted after the Florida shooting on Valentine's Day by Sinclair Broadcasting, which has 37% of the media stations in the country. And I think I linked out the piece that they did. And I was contacted from people like all over the world. I was getting like 20, 30 emails a day up until just a couple days ago. Like, it just kind of tailed off. But it was interesting because there was a thread that started. And I think it was a response because people started to thread things out on my Twitter. And I wasn't posting a lot, but other people are kind of posting and then posting back to each other and whatever. But somebody then got on this thread where they started and saying, one of the common denominators with school shooters is that they are special education students. I was like, wow, well, that's not accurate, first of all, but this was a claim that this person had made, and then of course there was the stuff kind of going back and forth, and 90% of it isn't true, and but it's rhetoric and passionate, but that did just kind of go away. That thread kind of got hot and then just went silent. But that's the kind of thing too that it's when people come in and they have a push and they're like, let's profile, let's screen all of the kids and let's do, we can profile out our school shooters. Well, you can't. I mean, we know that you can't do that. Now, with students, in need of mental health services, yes, I mean, that's one thing, but I'm saying, like, who's going to be a school shooter and who's not? There's no profile of a school shooter. The FBI has come out with that. The Secret Service has come out with that. So that is something that was frustrating when I saw that thread, and people want to try to figure out, like, who's it going to be, so we can eliminate these people, these students from our schools, so make our schools safer. And it's like, nope, it's not how that works. Such a tool does not exist, and if you do something like that, you're going to end up discriminating against a countless number of students. So I'm not sure exactly where I was going with that, but I just, that thread, I was going to jump in on it, but then it just silenced itself pretty fast, because I think, I don't know. But all right, everybody, thank you again, and we'll wrap up week 7, and then you'll get into the research module, and I'll open that up. And again, there's really nothing there except, like, you'll upload your assignment. I think I might have 1 or 2 links. It's already listed in the syllabus of what you need to do. Make it relevant for yourself. Again, if you have questions, you can email me. And it's, this is something I would say it's your capstone for the class. It's also something, like, if you are working with your special ed director or whatever, you can, this might be something you share with your school or share with your board or whatever you want to do. But, so I think there's so many ways you can take this assignment. I'm excited to read them, because I know they're going to just be really engaging, because small districts, big districts, individual buildings versus, like, a whole district and things like that. So All right. Any questions, please get a hold of me. Otherwise, I'm going to, once this week is done, I'm going to kind of be in the background, a little bit, because there's not going to be a lot of need for you to check in during that research module of about 5 weeks. When you're doing your stuff, you're, talking to people in your district and whatever. So the class will kind of go silent, and then, come back in and make sure that you get everything posted by the last day of class. So thank you so much. It's been my honor to work with you, and have a good research module, and let's finish up module 7 strong, and take care, everybody.